The Clockwork Heart of Old Cairo. Chapter 1. The Silence of the Tower. The dust of Old Cairo, usually a vibrant tapestry of noise and commerce, seemed to hold its breath. It was the year 1928, and a creeping anxiety had settled over the city, heavy and palpable, like the midday summer heat. The source of this unease was visible to all. The Sultan's Tower, which had stood sentinel over the Nile for centuries. At its apex, the great astronomical clock, the city's heart, was faltering. For generations, the rhythmic tick-tock of that monumental clock had set the pace of life. It called the merchants to their stalls, the scholars to their libraries, and the faithful to prayer. But for the past week, the clock had been inconsistent, its chimes weak, its hands stuttering. Now its powerful pendulum had slowed to a strained, almost painful thump. Thump. Every citizen knew, if the clock stopped, the order of the city would crumble. Layla, a young apprentice clockmaker of only 20 summers, felt this dread more acutely than anyone. Her grandfather, Hakim, the old master clockmaker, was confined to his bed, his hands too frail now to hold a delicate escapement. She was his heir, the only one who truly understood the colossal, intricate mechanism of the great clock. She stood in the cavernous clock chamber, a symphony of polished brass and oiled wood surrounding her. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, illuminating motes of dust dancing around the gears. "It is not a fault in the springs, grandfather," Layla had reported earlier, her voice echoing in the chamber. "Nor the weight chains. The main drive gear is intact. The fault lies deeper, something fundamental." Hakim, resting beneath a heavy quilt woven with astrological symbols, had sighed, his voice thin but firm. "It is the sunstone gear, my Layla. The great clock was built by the ancient caliphs, and legend says that a single vital gear, a sunstone cut from a starfall meteorite, was removed centuries ago by a rival kingdom. They left the clock working, but deliberately unstable. They knew that one day, the hidden imbalance would halt it forever." Layla stared at the empty space on the central mechanism, a space where an ornamental gear of immense complexity should have been. Only a modern, temporary steel replacement sat there, vibrating ominously. "The sunstone gear is the clock's soul," Hakim whispered. "It is said to be hidden in the Souk al-Gharib, the forgotten market. The one who built the market was obsessed with time and riddles. Find it, Layla. You have until midnight. After that, no human hand can restart the great clock." Chapter 2. The Labyrinth of Secrets. The Souk al-Gharib was not on any official map. It was a tangle of abandoned alleys behind the spice market, where the air was thick with the scent of forgotten memories. Layla, gripping a small brass compass that had been her grandmother's, stepped beneath a crumbling stone archway. The market was eerily silent. Stalls were covered with thick canvas, and the only sounds were the whisper of the wind and the increasingly irregular thump of the distant great clock. She followed the compass, which inexplicably began to spin wildly until it pointed to a closed, rusted iron gate marked with a single inscription. "What has no voice, yet tells all stories?" Layla's mind raced. What has no voice, yet tells all stories? She thought of the scrolls in her grandfather's library, the faded letters of ancient maps, the rings on an old tree. She thought of her craft, a clock. She noticed a small circular indentation on the gate, perfectly sized for the small, ornate key she wore around her neck, a key Hakim had given her years ago. She slid the key in, and the gate clicked open, revealing a dark, spiraling staircase leading down. Chapter 3. The Keeper of the Hourglass. The stairs led her into a circular room beneath the market. In the center sat a massive, rotating brass hourglass, nearly 10 feet tall, its sand filtering slowly, almost imperceptibly. Beside it stood an old man in white robes, his face lined like a worn desert map. He was the keeper, the guardian of the market's secret. "The apprentice," the keeper said, his voice a low rumble. "You seek the heart of time." "The sunstone gear," Layla corrected him, her voice firm. "The great clock will fail by midnight." The keeper simply gestured to the hourglass. "To claim the gear, you must first earn it by solving the final riddle of the builder." Look closely at the sands of time, for they reveal the lock. Layla approached the enormous hourglass. As she watched the sands, she realized the glass was not ordinary. Every few minutes, a cluster of dark, magnetic grains would clump together on one side of the lower bulb, briefly forming a symbol before falling apart. She waited patiently, her heart synchronizing with the slow thump, thump from above. The sands clumped again. This time they formed a perfect, intricate pattern, the shape of the moon's last quarter, superimposed upon the constellation of Orion. The keeper smiled. The lock is revealed. Now, the key. Layla looked around the room. On the stone wall were 72 small, circular recesses, each with a number carved beneath it, from 1 to 72. This was a complex lock, a chronological puzzle. She knew that the moon's last quarter corresponds to the 21st day of the lunar month. The constellation Orion, a hunter, has 3 bright stars that form his belt, 21 and 3. She went to the wall, found the recess marked 21 and the recess marked 3. She pressed them simultaneously. A low, grinding noise filled the chamber. A section of the floor, previously hidden, rose up to reveal a small, velvet-lined box. Inside, resting on crimson velvet, was the sunstone gear. It was breathtaking. The gear was not metal, but a single, massive crystal of deep amber, streaked with gold and pulsing with a soft, internal light. It wasn't just a mechanism, it was a captured sunset. Chapter 4. The Race Against Midnight. Layla took the sunstone gear, its warmth radiating through her palm, and climbed the winding stairs, emerging from the Souk al-Gharib. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in desperate shades of orange and violet. As she ran through the familiar streets toward the Sultan's tower, she noticed the silence had deepened. People stood frozen in the doorways of their homes and shops, looking up at the clock face. The air was heavy with anticipation. The clock had nearly stopped. The great minute hand had barely moved in the time she was underground. The hands now stood at 11:47 p.m. She had 13 minutes. She burst through the heavy bronze doors of the clock tower and scrambled up the internal scaffolding. The clock chamber was dark, illuminated only by the frantic beam of her lantern. She reached the central mechanism. The temporary steel gear was rattling violently near breaking point. The great clock was dying. Thump. Long pause. Thump. 11:53 p.m. With steady hands and a focused breath, Layla used her specialized tools to quickly remove the shuddering steel gear. The moment it was out, the entire mechanism locked, falling into absolute silence. The time was 11:55 p.m. The chamber was still, utterly quiet. Layla could hear her own heart pounding. She knew this was the point of no return. She lifted the sunstone gear. It weighed more than she expected, but the fit was perfect. It slid into the empty space on the main axle with a soft, metallic click that resonated like a chime. 11:58 p.m. Nothing happened. Layla closed her eyes, placing her hands on the cold brass framework of the mechanism. She wasn't just a mechanic. She was a master's apprentice. She spoke to the machine, her voice a plea in the darkness. "You are the heart of the city. Feel the time. Live." She reached for the massive frozen pendulum and gave it a single forceful push. Thump. It was the loudest sound she had ever heard. The sunstone gear, now integrated, began to glow. It spun once, twice, then found its rhythm. The internal mechanism shuddered, then caught. The heavy brass weights began to descend again. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Epilogue, the new time. As the great mechanism roared back to life, Layla looked up at the main gear. The luminous golden light of the sunstone gear flooded the chamber. Then from the city below, the sound rose, the deep resounding bong of the midnight chime. It was on time, precise and powerful. Bong, 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 bong. 12 chimes. Perfect. The next morning, the city woke to the familiar, comforting rhythm of the great clock. Merchants yelled, children laughed, and life flowed again. Layla descended the tower stairs, exhausted but exhilarated. At the bottom, waiting for her, was the keeper from the Souk al-Gharib, and beside him, leaning on a cane, was her grandfather Hakim. Hakim smiled, a look of profound pride on his face. He held out his hand. "You did not just fix the gear, Layla. You understood the riddle, and you gave the clock its soul back. The heart of Cairo beats because of you." He then took the small circular apprentice's pin from her lapel and replaced it with a heavy silver one, intricately engraved with a sun and a gear. "You are no longer the apprentice, Layla," Hakim announced softly. "You are the master clockmaker of Old Cairo." Layla looked up at the colossal tower, listening to the steady, magnificent tick-tock. The sunstone gear was spinning, a beacon of golden light, marking not just the time, but the beginning of her new life.